My name is Margaret Fields, and on the morning of my 64th birthday, my daughter grabbed the gift meant for me right out of my hands with a grin so bright, no one thought to stop her. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was a small square box, wrapped in deep burgundy paper with a silky ivory ribbon tied with a neat bow. No tag, no handwriting, no glitter, just silence. It had been placed at the center of the dining table, resting beside a vase of fresh gardenias and the banana cream pie Natalie had picked up last minute. I was reaching for the ribbon when her hand shot across the table. "Oh, is this for me?" she chirped already, dragging the box toward her lap, unwrapping it before I could blink. I opened my mouth, but what was I going to say? "No, Natalie. Put it back. Let your mother open her own birthday gift. That would only embarrass her and me. Everyone would say I was overreacting." Natalie was always like that, bright, magnetic, and unaware of how much room she took up. Or maybe she was aware. Maybe that was the problem. My sister Linda noticed. She leaned in beside me and whispered, "Wasn't that for you?" I nodded slowly. It doesn't matter. Because it didn't. Not in the way people thought. You see, that gift, the one Natalie had just torn open with glitter in her eyes and a laugh in her throat, wasn't just a birthday surprise. It was a carefully placed piece of something larger. A thread. A doorway. And when she flipped open the lid and pulled out the cream envelope resting inside, my heart didn't race. It slowed. I watched her eyes scan the front. No name, just a wax seal. For a moment she hesitated. Then she broke it open. There was silence. Her face changed in an instant, from playful to stiff. Her fingers stopped moving. Her jaw clenched. She read the letter twice. I know because her hand trembled the second time. Then, without a word, she shoved the lid back on, stuffed the box into her purse, stood up, and muttered, "I have to go." She didn't even say happy birthday. No one at the table knew what had just happened. My younger brother asked, "What was in the box?" Linda opened her mouth, but I shook my head. "She'll call," I said. "Just let her go." Inside, I was strangely calm. Like the moment you set a paper lantern afloat and watch it rise, knowing you've finally released something too heavy to carry anymore. Natalie was my only daughter, my only child really since her father passed years ago. She was brilliant in school, always ahead of the curve. Beautiful, talented, but selfish in a way that clung to her like perfume sweet to others, overwhelming to me. I'd always given her everything, my time, my attention, my money, my silence. And now I'd given her the gift meant for me. Not by accident. Natalie had grown up believing she deserved more than anyone else in the room, that she was entitled to first place, first bite, first choice. And over the years, I let it happen. Quietly, telling myself it's just easier. But lately, I had been haunted by a question: what have I taught her by always giving in? I had thought about that for months, which is why that letter, the one now in her purse, was never meant to be a birthday surprise. It was a truth, wrapped in ribbon, and she had taken it just as I knew she would not, because she earned it, but because she expected it. Back in my room that night, I pulled out an old journal and flipped to a page I'd written weeks ago. The day she takes the gift letter. Because only then will she discover it wasn't what she thought. And maybe she'll finally stop blaming me for not being the mother she imagined I should have been. That letter had been written by someone Natalie barely remembered, and it contained a story she didn't know existed. But it was time she knew. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in the quiet. No TV, no calls, no Facebook scrolling. Just the stillness of a mother waiting not for an apology, but for understanding. My phone buzzed once that night. It was Natalie. No message, just a missed call. I didn't call back. Because this time I needed her to come to me. On her own. Not out of guilt. Not out of panic. But out of realization. And for the first time in years, I felt like something in our dance, the tug of war of love and resentment, had shifted. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was the beginning of something I had long thought impossible. A truth between us, one she would never have accepted if I had handed it to her. But now she'd taken it all by herself. And that was precisely what I had hoped for. Natalie didn't call the next day, or the one after that. It didn't surprise me. When Natalie feels cornered, she retreats not with humility, but with silence sharp enough to cut. It's her way of staying in control. If she doesn't respond, she never has to admit she's been shaken. But I knew her well enough to know she was shaken. And it wasn't just the letter. It was what the letter represented. A crack in the story she'd always told herself about me, about her childhood, about who was to blame, and who was the victim. You see, Natalie has this look in her eyes. It's hard to describe unless you've seen it. A flash of entitlement masked as charm. Most people miss it. They see her warm smile, her wit, her elegance. But I've seen that look since she was 6, standing in the living room clutching a toy she had ripped from a cousin's hands. She had said back then with a perfectly straight face, "If I wanted it, why shouldn't I have it?" I laughed nervously. Everyone did. But I remember thinking, what if that never changes? And it didn't. As she got older, Natalie claimed more than toys. She claimed my time, hours of it, demanding help rides, support, favors. She claimed my attention, pulling it away from friends, my hobbies, even grief. When her father died, I barely had space to cry. Natalie needed me too much. But what she really claimed, what she believed was hers by right, was my devotion. That was the part no one saw. Even now at 64, I still caught myself hesitating before I spoke, afraid she'd twist my words or turn cold for days if she didn't like what she heard. I tiptoed, smiled, offered things before she asked, just to keep peace. But that morning with the gift, when she grabbed it without asking, something inside me didn't twist in anger. It settled. Because for once her selfishness had served a purpose. I had spent weeks crafting that letter. It wasn't mine, not exactly. It had been started decades ago by her father, Stephen, before he passed. He had scribbled parts in the margins of old notebooks, sometimes in letters to me he never sent. He wanted to tell Natalie the truth about his choices, about the business failure, the emotional distance the last years of our marriage. But he died before he could. So I finished the letter myself, wove his words into mine, told the story we never told her. The truth about why we lived with my sister for a year when Natalie was 10. Why Stephen left and came back only to leave again. Why I worked 2 jobs while pretending everything was fine. Natalie had created a version of the past that suited her pain. Mom was cold. Mom never explained. Mom just gave up on Dad and expected me to accept it. But now she had read a different version, the real one, and her silence told me she didn't know what to do with it. The gift box had been my final attempt to show her something, not that I was innocent, but that I wasn't the villain she imagined. 2 days later, I went about my routines, watered the porch plants, prepped soup for the seniors' center, wiped down the kitchen counter for no reason other than habit. My phone finally lit up just before dusk. "Natalie, can we talk?" No emoji, no exclamation point, just 4 words. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keys, and I typed, "Of course." She came over that night, but not to talk, just to look. I opened the door and she stood there clutching the same purse the box had disappeared into. Her face was bare, no makeup, hair pulled into a knot like she hadn't bothered with a mirror. For Natalie, that was unheard of. "Hi," she said, her voice small. I stepped aside. We sat in the living room, the quiet pressing in around us. She didn't pull out the letter. She didn't even mention it. Instead, she looked around the room like she hadn't been here 100 times before. "You moved the painting?" she said, pointing to a framed print of a red barn that had hung in the hallway since I moved in. "I did." She nodded. "It used to be in Dad's office." I waited. Then she asked, "Why didn't you tell me everything before?" There it was. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. Really looked. Not as a difficult daughter. Not as a source of years of resentment, but as a woman now in her late 30s still trying to understand why love didn't always look like warmth. "Because you weren't ready to hear it," I said. Her jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's true." She looked away. I let the silence stretch. She pulled the letter from her purse and held it in her lap. Unopened again. Folded neatly now like something sacred. "I don't remember him like this," she said. "I only remember when he left. He came back." "Yeah, but I was already angry." I nodded. "And you didn't tell me what really happened. I told you what you could bear at the time. And maybe I made the wrong call. But I didn't know how else to protect you." She stared at the envelope. "I thought you just didn't want to talk about it. That you didn't care if I understood." "I cared," I said, my voice steady. "I just knew you weren't asking to understand, you were asking to blame." She flinched, and in that tiny reaction I saw something new, a door cracking open. Natalie had built her story over the years to protect herself. It was easier to believe I had failed her than to accept that the man she adored was deeply flawed. That maybe I wasn't hiding things to be cruel, but because I was surviving. She didn't speak again that night, just stood up quietly and kissed my cheek. "Thanks," she whispered. And for the first time in decades, I didn't ask her what she meant, because I knew. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely lifted itself over the rooftops, casting soft golden streaks through the kitchen window. I poured a cup of coffee, half out of habit, half out of nerves. Natalie hadn't said much the night before, but something in her voice, in the way her eyes avoided mine, told me the storm was only just beginning. She was sifting through her entire life story, trying to figure out what parts were real and what parts were protective lies. And while she didn't say it aloud, I knew exactly what was racing through her mind. If this letter is true, then what else have I misunderstood? Natalie had always believed her father was the good one, the charming one, the gentle one. And I had let her believe that. I didn't correct her when she painted me as the emotionally distant parent, the disciplinarian, the one who always said no. I let her keep her hero. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now, as I stirred sugar into my coffee, I wondered how much damage I had caused by letting her love only half of the truth. Later that afternoon, she came back, unannounced. No call, no text. Just the sound of the front door opening like she still lived here. I was standing in the hallway when she appeared, holding the gift box, the letter inside, and a face full of contradictions. "Hi," she said again. I nodded. "Hi." She didn't wait for an invitation. Just walked to the living room and sat down on the couch like she had when she was 12 and sulking about a sleepover gone wrong. "I read it again," she said, voice flat. I sat in the armchair across from her, palms resting on my knees. She opened the letter and held it up like evidence in a courtroom. "Why would he write this to you?" "Not to me, because he didn't finish it," I replied gently. "He started it, but never got the chance to give it to you. Then, why give it to me now?" I let out a slow breath, because I realized I've been carrying this truth like a wound I was never allowed to clean, and because whether you believe it or not, you deserve to hear your father's real story. Natalie stared at me. Her eyes were glassy but not red. She wasn't crying. Not yet. "He said he failed. That he was scared. That he made excuses. That he left because he couldn't face his own reflection in me." I nodded. "And you never told me that?" "No," I said. "Because I didn't think it would change anything. It would have," she said quickly. Then after a pause, "Or maybe it wouldn't. I don't know." She folded the letter and placed it on the coffee table between us like she didn't want to touch it anymore. I remember the day he left for good, she said. He hugged me so tightly, told me he loved me so much. Then he walked out the door and I waited the whole day by the window. I could still see it, her little silhouette in the armchair by the curtains, legs tucked beneath her eyes, refusing to blink in case she missed him. You told me not to wait, she added, that he wouldn't be back that night. I didn't want to lie, I said softly. Well, I hated you for it. She said it like it was nothing, a fact she had rehearsed 100 times. I didn't flinch. I know. I hated how calm you were, she went on. How you just kept doing laundry and making dinner like nothing happened. Because if I stopped moving, I whispered, I wouldn't have started again. That made her pause. I used to think you didn't love him anymore, she said. That you were cold. I loved him, I replied. But I also knew who he really was. He was your father. He wasn't my husband anymore. She looked down. Her voice dropped. I built him into this perfect thing in my head. Because I needed to believe one of you loved me the right way. That was the moment I felt the air shift. Not just between us, but inside her. She wasn't angry anymore. She was grieving the version of her life she had clung to for years. And it hurt. Deeply. Natalie, I said, leaning forward slightly. You always thought I pushed you too hard. That I judged you? That I never let you be enough? But I was doing what I thought was necessary to make sure you didn't end up needing someone who would abandon you when things got hard. She rubbed her palms together. Well, I did anyway. I nodded. We can't control who we love, but we can control who we become. There was a long silence. Then she asked a question I never expected. Why did you let me take the gift? I smiled, but there was no amusement in it. Because I knew you would. You always do. You reach first. You grab. You assume everything is for you. Her cheeks flushed. So this was a test? No, I said. It was an invitation. To what? To grow up? She looked like she'd been slapped. Then something broke behind her eyes, not in anger but in recognition. I always thought you wanted to punish me, she said. No, I wanted to reach you. Her voice cracked. And if I hadn't taken the box, then maybe you weren't ready yet. She stood up, then paced to the window and back. You're not the mother I thought I had. I'm not the villain you needed me to be. Her face crumbled. And just like that, the first tear fell. Not because I'd said anything cruel, but because the scaffolding of her illusions had finally collapsed. And there in the ruins stood the truth. Not perfect, not pretty, but real. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and whispered, I don't know who I am without that story. I got up, walked over and touched her shoulder gently. Then maybe this is the moment you start writing a new one. She didn't leave that night. After our conversation in the living room, after the tears, she probably hadn't cried in years, Natalie stayed. She didn't say it aloud. Didn't ask, can I sleep here? She simply went upstairs into her old bedroom, the one I had carefully preserved all these years even after she moved out. The posters were gone, of course. The bright teal walls had been painted a soft beige, but the furniture was the same. The bookshelves, the creaky wooden dresser, even the lamp with the crack in the base. That room had always been hers, even when she didn't want it. I stood in the hallway for a moment after she closed the door. Just listening, not to eavesdrop. Just to feel her presence in the house again. A presence that didn't feel entitled or angry, but vulnerable. Small even. And that was new. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed watching the ceiling and letting all the words we had exchanged replay in my head. For years, I had begged for one honest conversation with my daughter, not about petty arguments or life updates or distant memories we rehashed over holiday dinners, but this kind of honesty, the kind that stings, the kind that matters. And now it had happened not because I forced it, but because I had let go. Let go of control. Let go of my need to correct her version of the story. Let go of waiting for an apology to heal me. I had simply let her take the gift. And in doing so, she had walked straight into a truth she couldn't ignore. In the morning, I found her in the kitchen barefoot, wearing one of my old cardigans over her pajamas. She was making coffee. The smell of it hit me first, rich and nostalgic. It was the same brand I used to brew when she was in high school, the one she'd sneak sips from before running to catch the bus. When she turned and saw me in the doorway, she smiled. Just slightly. "I made enough for two," she said. "Thanks," I replied, stepping inside. We sat at the table, the silence easy this time. She stirred her mug in slow circles. "You know, I hated that you didn't cry when Dad left." My eyes lifted. I said nothing. "I used to think you were heartless," she continued. "Like you didn't care. But now I wonder if you were just trying to hold it all together for me." "I was?" She nodded. "You did a good job. I just didn't see it." I took a sip of coffee, the warmth grounding me. "I know. I don't remember a lot from that time," she admitted. "Just the feeling that everything was cracking. It was." She looked at me. "And you still managed to raise me, pay the bills, keep the lights on. Smile. Not always. You smiled enough that I believed you were fine." I hesitated. Sometimes pretending to be fine was the only way I could keep from falling apart in front of you. That hit her. I watched her lower her eyes. "I guess I never asked what it was like for you." "No, you didn't," I said gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because children don't need their mothers to be broken," I said quietly. "They need them to be walls even when they're crumbling inside." She didn't speak for a while. Then she asked, "What would have happened if I never opened that box?" I looked at her. "Then you would have stayed angry. I would have stayed silent. And we would have carried the same story until one of us was no longer here to correct it." Her eyes welled up again. "That's terrifying. But true." She bit her lip. "I always thought you wanted me to take less, to be less. You were always telling me to slow down, think twice, wait my turn. Because I knew the world wouldn't always give you what you wanted. And I was trying to prepare you. Well, it just made me feel unloved." And that, I said, is the tragedy of motherhood. Sometimes what we give out of love gets interpreted as rejection. Natalie stared into her coffee like it could offer her answers. "Do you think I'm selfish?" she asked suddenly. I paused. "You've learned to survive by taking. And sometimes that survival instinct became habit even when you weren't in danger." She nodded. Slowly. "That sounds accurate." I reached across the table and rested my hand over hers. "But survival is a skill. You just need to learn when to use it and when to trust the people who are trying to love you." She looked up at me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "I know." The day passed gently. We cooked lunch together, a rare thing. She chopped onions while I stirred the pot. There was laughter, shared glances, even a moment when she apologized for a sarcastic comment that years ago would have gone unnoticed by her and left me quietly aching. Later that evening, we sat on the couch with a photo album between us. Natalie pointed at one picture of her 8th birthday party, a chocolate cake smeared across her face, Stephen lifting her onto his shoulders. "I loved that day," she said. "I remember," I said. "You cried when it was over." "I cried because it felt like we were a real family." I looked at her. "We were a real family," I said. "We were just a hurting one." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that simple act I felt something in my chest unravel. Years of distance, misunderstandings, words left unsaid. They all softened. That night, as she packed her things, she paused by the front door. "Can I come back next week?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "Anytime." She looked hesitant. Not because I want something, just to talk. I smiled. That would be the real gift. As the door clicked shut behind her, I sat back on the couch, the photo album still open beside me. My eyes landed on a picture of the two of us, me holding her as a toddler, both of us smiling. In that photo, I saw a version of us before the misunderstandings, before the years of hurt. And now I finally believed that version of us might return. Not because I forced it, but because she took something that led her straight to the truth. And that truth, the one hidden inside a gift she was never supposed to take, had brought us back to each other. Exactly as I had hoped. The following week, Natalie came back as promised. But she didn't arrive empty-handed. She walked in holding 2 cups of coffee and a small, neatly wrapped box gold paper cream ribbon, a tag that simply read, "For Mom." I didn't say anything at first, just took the coffee and smiled. "I figured it was time I brought you something," she said, placing the box gently on the kitchen counter. I chuckled softly, trying to reverse the curse. "Something like that?" She smirked, but her voice was tender. We stood there for a moment, the box between us like some sacred object. A few weeks ago, Natalie would have just thrust it into my hands and told me to open it now. But today, she waited, watched me carefully, let me move at my own pace. That alone felt like a miracle. I untied the ribbon, slowly unwrapping the paper until I revealed the item inside, a delicate porcelain hummingbird mounted on a wooden base. Its wings were spread mid-flight, every detail carefully painted as if frozen in a moment of hope. "I saw it in a shop near my office," she said. "It reminded me of the one we used to have in the sunroom when I was little." "The one Dad knocked over?" I asked, smiling. Natalie laughed. "Exactly. I figured. Maybe it was time to replace it." I looked at the figurine, its fragile wings catching the morning light. It was beautiful. And more importantly, it was thoughtful. Not expensive, not flashy, just sincere. "Thank you," I said quietly. She nodded. We moved to the living room, the conversation flowing more naturally now about books, the garden work. She didn't try to dominate the discussion. She asked questions, listened, laughed at things that weren't about her. But I could tell something else was on her mind. There was a weight behind her smile, a twitch in her fingers, a restlessness in her shifting posture. Finally, she sighed and leaned forward. "I've been thinking about what you said, about survival, about how I take without asking." I waited. I didn't realize how much of my identity was wrapped up in needing to be first at everything, even with you. I tilted my head. "Tell me what you mean." Natalie swallowed hard. "Growing up, I always felt like I had to compete. Not with other kids exactly, but with your attention. If I didn't grab it, it slipped away. You were so busy, tired, overworked, focused. Dad was inconsistent. But when he was there, he saw me. Or at least, I thought he did." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "So I learned to grab, to speak louder, to ask first, to expect." I nodded. "And did it help?" "At the time, maybe. I got what I wanted. But now," she looked at me, her voice cracking slightly, "now I see it didn't get me what I needed." I took her hand gently, which was to be loved for more than what I demanded. I squeezed her hand. "You were always loved, Natalie, even when you made it hard." She laughed, a sad, breathy laugh. "I know. I just didn't believe it. Not when you were quiet. Not when you held your feelings so tight. I did that because I was afraid," I said. "Afraid that if I let it all out, it would drown us both." "I think I was afraid too," she admitted. "Afraid to see you as human." That struck me. Not angry. Not bitter. Just human. I wasn't ready to hear your side. I needed you to be the one who failed me. That way, I didn't have to feel the guilt of how much I pushed you away. My throat tightened. Why now? I asked softly. Why finally let yourself see it? She looked at me and smiled sadly. Because the letter broke something open. It made me realize I've been living in a story where I was always the center and the victim. But it was never that simple, was it? No, I said. It rarely is. She leaned back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. I read the letter again last night, she whispered. And something stuck with me this time. What? That part where Dad said, I ran away because your mother never did. She stayed, and I couldn't bear the weight of her strength. I nodded. I never understood what that meant. But now I do. She looked up at me. You were the one holding everything together, and I blamed you for not letting it fall apart. We sat in that silence, the hum of the fridge in the background, and I felt something shift again. Not an earthquake this time, but the steady movement of tectonic plates, settling into a new position. Natalie, I said carefully, you've always had a strong will. You learned to survive in a fractured home. That strength got you far. But sometimes, it's okay to set it down. You don't have to prove your worth by being the loudest or the fastest or the first to grab. Sometimes the real strength is in waiting, in watching, in letting things come to you. She nodded slowly. I'm learning. That's all I've ever wanted, I said. Not perfection, just growth. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. I started writing things down, she said, flipping through the pages. Stuff I remember. Things I want to ask you. Things I want to understand before it's too late. I smiled, touched by the gesture. That's a beautiful start, I said. She looked hesitant again. Do you think I've been a bad daughter? I shook my head. I think you've been a hurting daughter. And sometimes that hurt made you act in ways that pushed people away. But bad, no. Just unfinished. She exhaled a full-body release. That feels true, she said. That afternoon, we sat in the backyard together. The sun was bright but not harsh, a light breeze rustling through the hydrangeas. Natalie sat cross-legged on the bench scribbling in her notebook, while I pruned a few dead leaves from my potted basil. Do you ever regret not remarrying? She asked out of the blue. I smiled without looking up. No. Why not? Because I spent so much of my life giving everything to someone else. When he left, I learned how to give things to myself. And that was enough. She stared at me. You really are stronger than I gave you credit for. I looked over. You're stronger than you gave yourself credit for. We both laughed quietly. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just healing. It was rebuilding. Not trying to go back to who we were, but stepping forward as who we had become. And it had all started with that gift. The one she grabbed. The one I'd hoped she would. Because sometimes the only way for someone to discover what's truly meant for them is to reach out and take it even if they don't understand it yet. The next few weeks unfolded with an odd sense of peace I wasn't used to. Natalie kept coming back. Sometimes on a Sunday morning with muffins in a paper bag, sometimes after work when the sky was already dark. She no longer treated my house like a drop-in station. Now she stayed, talked, cooked, asked if I needed help. And I didn't flinch at her presence anymore. I didn't wonder if a storm was coming with her. I didn't brace myself for the passive jabs or sudden departures. I just let her be here. And that was the quiet miracle, not just that she changed, but that I could feel safe with her again. But of course, healing isn't a perfect arc. One evening after dinner, we were washing dishes when she asked, Did you ever think I was a mistake? I stopped drying a plate mid-motion. No, I said. Never. She didn't look up from the sink. Not even when I was a nightmare teenager. Not when I screamed at you and said I wished I had lived with Dad instead. I remember that night, I said. But no, not even then. She swallowed. I was so cruel. You were angry? I corrected gently. And confused. You needed someone to blame. I picked you. You always picked me? I said, the edges of my voice soft. Because I stayed. That made her freeze. I placed the dish towel on the counter. Natalie, you weren't a mistake. You were a mirror. You reflected everything I didn't want to face: my exhaustion, my grief, my fears. And I think, sometimes I blamed you too. Not because you did anything wrong, but because I didn't know how to face my own emptiness. She looked at me finally. I'm sorry you had to carry that. And I'm sorry you had to grow up thinking love was something you had to wrestle for. We stood there in silence, two women tangled in the complexity of decades, slowly pulling the knots loose. After a while, she asked, "What would you have done if I never came back?" I hesitated before answering. "I would have kept loving you," I said, "even from a distance. But I would have also accepted that some daughters can't meet their mothers halfway, and that's a kind of grief I had already prepared myself to carry." She blinked fast. "You make peace with so much?" "I've had to." "That's amazing," she whispered. I smiled sadly. "It's survival." She stepped closer, her hands still damp from the water, and hugged me. "I'm trying to meet you halfway now." "I know," I whispered into her shoulder. "You're doing better than you think." That night after she left, I went up to my room and opened the drawer where I kept the letter. The original copy. The one I'd transcribed and folded into that gift box. I ran my fingers over the pages, rereading Stephen's clumsy handwriting. "If she ever asks why I left, tell her I wasn't brave. Not the way you were. You stayed. You held it all. And I ran from the weight. If she grows up resenting you, remind her that her father loved her, but not enough to face his own shame." When I first read those words years ago, they gutted me. But now, I saw them as an offering. A confession that freed us both. The next time Natalie came by, I handed her the original letter. "I think you're ready to have this," I said. She stared at it like it might burn her fingers. "This is his writing," I nodded. "Every word." She opened it slowly, reverently. As she read, her breath became unsteady. "I thought you made it up," she whispered. "Or polished it. Filtered it through your version." "I didn't." She looked up, the emotion naked on her face. "I always believed he was just busy. That he left because of money problems, not because he didn't want to stay." "I know." I told myself it had nothing to do with me. "It didn't," I said. "But it had everything to do with him." She folded the letter and placed it on her lap. "Why do we protect people who leave?" she asked. "Why did I defend him so much? Because grief looks for comfort. And sometimes comfort is found in lies." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I want to tell this story someday. To someone. Maybe. To my own daughter if I ever have one." I smiled. "Then I hope you tell it with the full truth. Not just the pain, but the healing too." That day, something new bloomed between us. Natalie started asking about my life, not as her mother, but as Margaret. The woman before marriage. The woman before motherhood. Before grief. Before sacrifice. "What did you dream of doing before Dad?" she asked one afternoon. I laughed. "I wanted to open a tiny bookstore with a garden patio. Sell tea, host poetry readings. Why didn't you?" "Life." I shrugged. "Stephen's work, bills, you." She didn't flinch at that last word. Not anymore. Instead, she asked, "Do you still want that?" I smiled. "I think I'd just settle for someone else making me tea these days." She laughed and pulled out her phone. "Well then, I'm ordering you a fancy sampler box tonight." I raised an eyebrow. "Look at you, giving instead of grabbing." She grinned. "I'm learning." And she was. Day by day, Natalie showed up more as a daughter than a storm. She started helping me clean the attic. Volunteered to fix the squeaky fence gate. Drove me to the doctor when I had a dizzy spell without making it about her schedule. She didn't expect applause. She didn't demand recognition, and that was how I knew the change was real. One evening, after sorting old boxes in the attic, she sat beside me on the floor holding a faded photograph of Stephen and me at our wedding. "You were really in love," she said, staring at the image. "I was." She hesitated. "Do you still miss him?" "Not the man he became," I said, "but the one I first knew. Sometimes." She nodded. "I think I was always chasing that version of him, even when I was too old to believe in it." We sat quietly for a while. Then she asked, "And what about now? Are you happy?" I turned to her. "Yes," I said honestly, "because for the first time in years I have my daughter back." Her lip trembled. "I'm sorry it took so long." I reached over and touched her cheek. "You came when you were ready. That's all that matters." The seasons began to shift not long after that spring to early summer, the kind of days where the air smells like soil and sun and something new trying to grow. I found myself waking up earlier, just to sit on the porch with my coffee watching the neighborhood stretch itself into the day. It was during one of those quiet mornings that I realized how different everything felt, not around me, but inside me. For years, I had carried the ache of an unbalanced relationship with Natalie, a love that always leaned one way. And now, for the first time since she was a child, I felt that love leaned back. She called regularly, stopped by with groceries I didn't ask for, sent texts just to check in. But it wasn't the actions themselves, it was the absence of resistance, the gentleness that had replaced the edge in her voice, the awareness. One Saturday, we spent the whole afternoon planting herbs in the garden. She wore her hair up in a loose bun, dirt smudged on her cheek, and laughed as she overwatered the mint. "You always said I had a heavy hand," she grinned. "Still do," I said, nudging her shoulder. "But at least now you apologize after." We both laughed. When we went inside to wash up, I saw her glance at the kitchen table at the photo of her as a baby curled against my chest. "I think I resented that photo for a long time," she said suddenly. "Why?" "Because it made me feel guilty, like I wasn't living up to how much you loved me." I turned to her towel in my hands. "Natalie, loving you was never the problem. It was the not knowing how to reach you that hurt." She nodded slowly, and I kept pushing, thinking you didn't try hard enough. We sat down at the table. No plates between us, no coffee, just sunlight across the wood grain and a shared understanding. "Do you ever regret not fighting harder to correct me?" she asked. "To make me see the truth sooner," I thought about it. "No," I said. "Because truth delivered before someone's ready isn't truth, it's noise." She stared at me. "That's wise. It's just age?" I smiled. Eventually, we stopped trying to win arguments and start hoping for clarity. She reached out and took my hand. "You gave me something I didn't realize I needed. That letter didn't just tell me about Dad. It showed me you. The version of you I ignored because it was easier to blame you than understand you." I squeezed her fingers. "It wasn't just a letter," I said. "It was an invitation." "To what?" "To see me. Not as the mother you needed, but as the woman I am." She blinked fast. "That's what's hardest, you know. Realizing that you had a life outside of being my mom." "I always did," I said. "I just tucked it into the corners so you could have your space." There was a long pause. Then she asked something I never thought she'd say. "Can I tell you what I remember most about being little?" I nodded. "That night, the power went out and you lit all the candles. You made us pretend we were on a ship. We drank juice out of mugs and you told stories in a pirate voice. I laughed, the memory hitting me like a warm wind. You were terrified of the dark." "I was," she smiled. "But you made it feel like an adventure." "I was terrified too," I admitted. "But I didn't want you to see it." Her eyes widened. "You were scared. It was the first time the lights went out after your dad left. And I remember thinking, If I can make her laugh tonight, maybe we'll both be okay. Natalie pressed her lips together, emotion flooding her expression. You were always braver than I knew, she whispered. I wasn't brave, I replied. I was just determined. She sat back, wiping a tear from her cheek. You know, I always thought I inherited Dad's charm, his confidence, but now I think the best parts of me, the real strength, came from you. I felt something unlock in me at that. A release, a warmth. Not pride, not relief. Recognition. It had taken decades, but she finally saw me. Not the ghost of disappointment she projected onto me. Not the silent judge she resented. Me. Margaret. The woman who had held the world together in the small, invisible ways. That weekend she stayed over again, helped me reorganize the linen closet. We laughed about old towels I refused to throw away, played cards at the kitchen table, and watched an old black and white movie with popcorn between us. She fell asleep on the couch, her head resting against my shoulder. And for a moment it felt like I had time traveled back to when she was a little girl, still small enough to carry, still trusting enough to fall asleep with her cheek pressed against me. But this time there was no weight of responsibility, no fear of what tomorrow might bring. Just peace. The next morning she woke up early and cooked breakfast eggs, toast coffee, and even cut fruit in a glass bowl. I figured I'd let you sleep in for once, she said. Well, now I'm suspicious, I joked, raising an eyebrow. She laughed. No hidden motives, just gratitude. I sat down at the table, watched her move around the kitchen. Confident, comfortable, capable. And I felt something that surprised me. Hope. Hope that this version of us, this tender, repaired version, could last. Later, as she was leaving, she paused at the door and said, I told someone at work about us. Oh, she was complaining about her mom. And I said, you know, sometimes the story we have in our head isn't the one our mother actually lived. I smiled. And what did she say? She cried. Natalie said. Then she called her mom. I laughed gently. Sounds like I'm influencing lives by proxy now. Grace is truth, right? She teased, referencing my storytelling channel. Maybe you should tell our story one day. Maybe I will, I said, smiling. As the door closed behind her, I realized something profound. Sometimes the gift you hope your child will take isn't a thing, it's a truth. A painful, beautiful, heavy truth. And when they finally reach for it, even if they do so selfishly, impulsively, without understanding what it means, something begins to bloom. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It doesn't matter how messy the journey is. What matters is that they took it. And that, in the end, is precisely what I hoped for. A few weeks after that breakfast, Natalie surprised me again, this time with a phone call I didn't expect. Can I bring someone over for lunch this Sunday? She asked, her tone cautious but hopeful. I raised an eyebrow even though she couldn't see it. Someone? There was a pause. My therapist. I blinked. Your therapist. She exhaled softly. Yeah, I've been seeing someone. Just working through stuff. She knows all about you. About Dad. The letter. She thinks it might be helpful if we talk together. Only if you're comfortable, though. I didn't answer right away. I think Natalie mistook my silence for resistance. You don't have to say yes, she added quickly. It's just, I've been digging into a lot, and sometimes I feel like I'm unearthing pieces of both of us. I want to get it right. I closed my eyes and smiled faintly. She wasn't asking for permission to complain. She was asking for partnership. And that was new. I'd be happy to meet her, I said. Sunday arrived. Natalie showed up at noon with a nervous energy I hadn't seen in a while, not the entitled kind, but the tender, uncertain kind. The kind that comes from wanting to do something right. Her therapist, a woman named Camilla, was in her 40s, calm, warm-eyed, and observant. She greeted me with a gentle handshake and complimented the lilac blooming by my porch. Over a light lunch we talked. Not about therapy. Just life, work, gardens, books. Camilla was easy to be around. She had the rare skill of making you feel heard even when you weren't talking. After we cleared the dishes, we sat in the living room with tea. Camilla turned to me. "Natalie told me a lot about you," she said, "and I just want to thank you for being open to this. Not all parents are." I smiled faintly. "Well, not all daughters come back the way mine did." Natalie looked down, cheeks pink. Camilla continued. "Sometimes we inherit pain we don't understand, and sometimes that pain creates stories that don't reflect the full truth." I nodded. "That's what I've been learning." Camilla smiled. "Would it be all right if I asked a few questions?" I glanced at Natalie. She gave a small nod. "Of course," I said. And so gently Camilla asked about the early years, what Stephen had been like, how I coped after his absence, what choices I made, and why. I spoke slowly, honestly. Natalie listened with unusual quiet. She didn't interrupt, didn't challenge, just absorbed. At one point, Camilla asked, "What was the hardest part of being a mother to Natalie?" I paused. "The silence," I said, feeling like I was shouting into a void, giving everything and hearing nothing back. Natalie looked at me, her eyes full. "And what did you need most from her? Just to be seen. Not as an obstacle, not as the one who ruined everything, but as a woman doing her best." Natalie wiped a tear from her cheek. Camilla then turned to her. "And Natalie, what's been the hardest part about being her daughter?" Natalie swallowed, feeling like I had to earn her warmth, that it wasn't just there. I turned toward her. "I never withheld it," I said. "But I did hide my exhaustion. Maybe you read that as distance." She nodded. "I think I wanted you to fall apart in front of me, so I could believe you hurt as much as I did. That wasn't your burden to carry, but I needed to feel connected," she said. "And anger was easier than empathy." Camilla leaned back. "It sounds like both of you were protecting each other in ways that ultimately kept you apart." We both nodded. And in that moment, something clicked, not just for me, but in the room itself. As if a thick curtain had finally been drawn open, letting light pour in. After Camilla left, Natalie lingered. "Thank you for doing that," she said. I touched her arm. "Thank you for wanting to understand me." She smiled. "I used to think being right was more important than being close." I tilted my head. "What do you think now?" She looked down. "That closeness takes more courage." I reached into the drawer beside the couch and pulled out something. I'd been keeping, a photograph of us from a school recital when she was 10. She'd just finished her part and come running into my arms, face glowing with pride. I handed it to her. "You were always brave," I said. "You just didn't always use that bravery in the right direction." She looked at the photo, then back at me. "And you were always gentle. I just didn't know how to let it in." That evening, she stayed for dinner again. We listened to old records, folded laundry together, and she even read a few pages from her journal aloud. Her entries were raw, honest, full of questions and slowly forming truths. "I'm trying to map out the parts of me I never examined," she said. "That's the first step to becoming whole," I replied. Before she left, she asked, "Do you think there are still things we haven't said?" I nodded. "There always will be, but we're saying more than we used to." She hugged me tightly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I love you, Mom." I held her close, whispering, "I never stopped loving you, even when you pushed me away." And that was the night I knew we had truly crossed over. From two women divided by memory and expectation, to two humans choosing day by day to understand and forgive. Because sometimes the gift isn't wrapped in paper or tied with ribbon. Sometimes the gift is truth, messy, late arriving, and uninvited. And if you're lucky, the person who grabs it will open it in time. A few days after our talk with Camilla, I got a text from Natalie late in the evening. "I found something today. Can I bring it by tomorrow? I replied simply, Of course. I'll put the kettle on. When she arrived the next afternoon, she was carrying an old shoebox. Her expression was unreadable, not upset, not excited, just focused, as if she had unearthed something that had been hidden for far too long. She placed the box on the coffee table and sat across from me. This was in the back of my closet, she said. I forgot I kept it. I leaned forward as she opened the lid. Inside were scattered remnants of childhood photographs, crumpled drawings, friendship bracelets, old notes. But on top of the pile was a small music box, the one Stephen had given her on her 5th birthday. The one she used to carry from room to room, winding the tiny key over and over, even when the song started to slow and slur. I used to think this was the only beautiful thing he ever gave me, she said quietly. It was a gift, I replied. But not the only one. She looked up. What do you mean? I hesitated, then said, He gave you life. And he gave you charm, ambition. He gave you pieces of him that were bright. But he also left behind his silence, his avoidance. And that wasn't your fault. But it became something you carried. She nodded slowly. And I punished you for it. Because I was the one who stayed. Her eyes shimmered, but she held my gaze. I want to stop carrying his ghost like a shield. That's not something you do in one day, I said. But recognizing it is the beginning. She turned the music box over in her hands, then wound the key. The soft melody started to play off-key, worn but still recognizable. A lullaby from another lifetime. You used to sing this to me, she whispered. I did. When you had night terrors. She looked startled. I don't remember that. You were 6. It was after Stephen's second departure. You didn't want to sleep. You thought if you did, someone else would disappear. Her lips trembled. Why didn't you tell me that? Because I didn't want you to remember your childhood as something dark. I wanted you to feel safe. She wiped her cheek. I wish I'd known. Maybe I wouldn't have been so angry all the time. Maybe I said. Or maybe you just needed to grow into a woman who could carry both joy and pain without crumbling. Natalie exhaled deeply. Do you think we ever really forgive the people who hurt us? I thought for a long moment before answering. I think real forgiveness comes when you stop needing the past to have been different. She sat back in her chair, that sentence sinking into her like warm rain. After a long silence, she pulled out another item from the box, a card. Folded, faded edges curled. She handed it to me. It was a Mother's Day card. Handwritten. Clearly her handwriting, but with words that surprised me. I love you even when I'm mad at you. I don't know how to say thank you, so I drew a flower. She had sketched a daisy. Lopsided. A child's effort. But sincere. I don't even remember writing that, she said. I kept it. I smiled. Because even when you pushed me away, I knew this part of you still lived inside. She stared at me as if seeing me again for the first time. I'm glad you didn't give up on me. I considered it, I admitted with a half laugh. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I didn't know how to love you without losing myself. She blinked. That's what I've been doing too, haven't I? You were fighting ghosts, I said gently. I just happened to be the only one left standing. She nodded. There was a long silence between us then, not heavy but full. The kind of silence that makes room for new things to grow. Finally, she reached across the table and took my hand. You know what I realized, she asked? That I didn't actually steal that gift from you. Oh, I asked. She smiled. I took it. But you let me. And I think part of you always wanted me to find that truth. I nodded slowly. I did. You planted it, she said. And I walked right into it thinking I'd won something. But what you really found was yourself. She nodded, her fingers tightening around mine. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not making me pay for every mistake. For giving me a way back. I smiled at her. Sometimes love isn't about boundaries, I said. It's about keeping the door unlocked just in case they come home. She laughed softly. That sounds like something you should write in your journal. I already did, I teased. As the music box melody faded into silence, Natalie stood and walked to the window. You know what I want to do next, she said. What? Start a new box. One with new memories. No ghosts. Just us. Moving forward. That sounds beautiful. She turned to me. And maybe I could help you with that bookstore idea. I blinked. You remembered? Of course I did. Tea and poetry, right? I grinned. You'd hate all the slow days. Maybe not anymore, she said. Maybe I'm finally ready for stillness. We laughed. And in that moment, with the sun slipping across the floor, the shoebox full of past resting beside us, and the future still unwritten, I realized she had grabbed the gift. Not out of greed, but out of hope. And in doing so, she had given me something far more precious than any wrapped box could hold. She gave me back my daughter. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those quiet golden hours when the sun sits just right on the windowsill, catching specks of dust midair and making everything feel softer than it actually is. Natalie arrived with a sketch pad in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. I brought soup ingredients, she said, walking through the door without knocking the way family always should. I took the bag from her and peeked inside. Carrot, celery, thyme, chicken stock. Trying to earn more points, I teased. She shrugged playfully, trying to feel useful. We moved around the kitchen with ease, chopping, peeling, stirring. She talked about her week, nothing dramatic, just work updates, books she was reading, a new podcast she liked. And then, while I was scraping carrots into the pot, she said, I've been writing letters. I looked up. To who? To myself, she replied. Different versions of me. The girl who thought love had to be loud. The teenager who thought you didn't care. The woman who didn't know what she was carrying. I said nothing, but my heart swelled. She continued. Camilla said it might help. That maybe I'd finally be able to forgive those versions instead of trying to erase them. That's a wise woman you've got helping you. She smiled. She says the same about you. I stirred the soup slowly. Do you read them back? Not yet, she said. But I think I will. She stepped closer to the counter. Do you think people ever really change? I paused. No. I think they become more of who they really are once the pain is named. That's what it feels like, she said. Like I'm not changing, I'm remembering. She opened her sketch pad and laid it on the kitchen table. Inside were drawings, charcoal portraits mostly. But in the center of the first page was a self-portrait. Natalie drawn in fine strokes with her younger self reflected in the mirror behind her. The little girl in the reflection had tears in her eyes, but she was reaching toward the woman, not away from her. I didn't realize I remembered what I looked like at that age, she said. But I do. I sat beside her, tracing the edge of the paper with my finger. She's beautiful, I said. She was angry, Natalie corrected. But she was also scared. And now I'm trying to show her that she's safe. She turned the page and revealed another sketch, this one of me. I blinked. It was from a photograph years ago, taken without my knowledge. I had just finished trimming roses in the garden, hands, dirty hair up in a scarf, a smudge of dirt across my cheek. But I was smiling. I never noticed how strong you looked, she whispered. I never felt strong in that moment, I said. You looked like someone who had lost so much and still chose to bloom. I swallowed a sudden knot in my throat. She reached over and touched my arm. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. You see me now? I said. Later, while the soup simmered and Natalie read aloud from her journal, I watched her closely. The way her shoulders no longer curled inward with defensiveness. The way she paused before speaking, not to censor herself, but to consider. Growth isn't loud. It doesn't make an entrance. It creeps in quietly in how a person listens, how they soften their gaze, how they stop filling silence with old wounds. Natalie was growing, and for the first time she wasn't growing away from me, she was growing toward me. After lunch, she helped me clean up, and then we sat on the back porch, tea in hand. The garden was blooming more than usual this year. I pointed to the lilacs and said, "Those shouldn't have survived the frost." "They did," she said. "They're stubborn like someone else I know." I smiled. She turned to me. "I want to tell you something, and I don't want you to brush it off." "Okay. All right. I've spent so much time asking for things from you: attention, approval, space, forgiveness, and I don't know if I've ever offered you anything in return." "You've given me plenty," I said. "I'm not talking about gestures," she clarified. "I'm talking about seeing you, understanding you, respecting your story, not just my version of it." I was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's all I ever wanted." She leaned back, eyes on the horizon. "I think I'm finally ready to stop rewriting the past and start building a future that doesn't have to argue with it." "That's a beautiful thought." She turned to me again, more serious now. "There's something else. A decision I've made." I waited. "I've started the paperwork to change the name on my will." My eyebrows lifted. "What?" She smiled faintly. "I used to list a friend, someone I thought would handle things better than family. But now, I've added you. Not because I expect you to do anything, but because I want you to know I trust you again." My eyes stung. "Natalie, it's symbolic," she said. "But I needed to do it. I needed to undo all the ways I've cut you out emotionally and practically." "I never wanted anything from you," I said. "Just a relationship. And now you have it." We sat in the hush of that moment, two women who had finally found their way back, not by accident, not by fate, but by choice. And that was the most profound thing of all. When she left that day, she hugged me tightly and said, "Next Sunday, my place. I'll cook." "Will there be fire?" I teased. "Probably. But I promise not to burn anything important." I watched her walk to her car, the breeze catching her hair, her smile real. I stood on the porch long after she drove away, tea cooling in my hands, heart full. All those years I had feared I was losing her. But maybe she just needed to lose herself a little before she could find her way back. And in grabbing the gift that wasn't hers, she found the truth that was. The following Sunday, I drove to Natalie's house. It felt strange at first. I had been here before, of course, but always as a guest of obligation. Holidays, birthdays, occasional strained dinners that left me aching inside long after I left. But this time, it was different. She had invited me. Not because it was expected, but because she wanted me there. When I stepped out of the car, she was already at the door, apron on, a smear of something across her cheek. Flour, maybe. Or sauce. She waved and said, "You're early. You told me noon." "It's noon." She grinned. "I didn't think you'd be this precise. I didn't want to give you time to change your mind." She laughed and stepped aside. "Come in." The moment I walked through the doorway, I felt it, the shift. The space was still hers. Sleek, modern furniture, framed black and white photos, that faint citrus smell I'd always associated with her. But there were small signs of something new. A tea set, not coffee, laid out on the table. My favorite kind of crackers on the counter. And in the background, music playing softly. Classical, not the pop she usually preferred. "You redecorated," I said. She shrugged. "Not really, just recalibrated." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds suspiciously like therapy speak." She smirked. "I've been reading, and journaling, and letting go of things that don't reflect who I actually want to be." She guided me into the kitchen. There was food, a lot of it. More than just for the two of us. "Expecting company?" She hesitated. "Actually, yes. I wanted you to meet someone." I looked at her. "Someone." She smiled carefully. Someone I've been seeing a few months now, but I didn't want to introduce him until I was in a place where you and I were whole. I blinked, then nodded slowly. I'm honored. Before I could ask more, the doorbell rang. She disappeared and returned moments later with a man, mid-40s, tall, kind eyes, a little nervous. Mom, this is Drew. He reached out his hand. It's really nice to meet you, Mrs. Fields. Call me Margaret, I said, shaking his hand. We sat down, the three of us, and I observed quietly as Natalie moved between us, not performing, not over-explaining, but simply being. She was softer, calmer. She didn't interrupt. She didn't brag. She didn't steer the conversation like a captain gripping a wheel too tightly. And Drew. He was gentle with her, watched her when she spoke, laughed at her jokes in a way that wasn't patronizing. When she forgot to serve herself salad, he reached for the tongs and did it for her, without a word. After lunch, Drew offered to do the dishes. Natalie told him to go relax, she and I would handle it. Good man, I said, when he stepped out of earshot. He really is, she said, rinsing plates. And I wouldn't have recognized that a year ago. I would have called him boring. Why? Because he doesn't make me chase. And back then, I only knew how to feel alive if I was chasing something. I handed her a towel. And now I'm learning how to receive. We dried dishes side by side in a rhythm that felt practiced, as if we'd done it for years without the interruptions of resentment and misunderstanding. When the last plate was put away, she turned to me, towel in her hands. There's something I want to ask you, she said. Go ahead. She looked nervous now, the kind of nervous that meant something mattered. I want to write about us, about everything. Not to shame you, not to make myself the victim, but to tell the truth, to honor both sides. Would that be okay? I didn't answer right away, not because I was unsure, but because I was overwhelmed. You want to share this publicly? Maybe, she said, or maybe just in a workshop, a memoir, a podcast. I don't know. But the point is, I want the story to live somewhere, because it's shaped me, and I think it could help someone else. I nodded slowly. You have my blessing, I said, as long as you write with love, not vengeance. She smiled. I don't carry vengeance anymore. She led me to her office, a small room lined with bookshelves, a desk facing the window. On the wall were sticky notes, character sketches, plot points, pieces of memory. One of them read, "The gift wasn't stolen, it was received without understanding." Another, "She planted the truth in the only way I'd ever accept it, by letting me think it was mine." I touched that one. You remembered. I didn't just remember, she said. I finally understood. We stood in that room together, surrounded by the beginning of something sacred, a retelling not of what happened, but of how two women unlearned the wrong things and found each other again. That evening before I left, Natalie handed me an envelope. Another letter, I asked. She nodded. But this one's from me. I took it home and waited until I was alone to open it. Inside were 2 pages handwritten, shaky in places but strong in voice. Dear Mom, I took the gift because I believed it was meant for me. I didn't realize the real gift was what came after the unraveling, the truth, the mirror I didn't want, but desperately needed. Thank you for giving it to me anyway. Thank you for not pulling it back when you saw me taking it. Thank you for trusting me to come back after reading it. I see you now. Not as the mother I resented, but as the woman who survived. And I love you more for every part of your story I used to ignore. This is my promise from now on. Every gift I give you will be chosen with care, not taken by assumption. Because I finally understand what it means to give. Love, Natalie. I sat in the living room, letter pressed against my chest, and cried. Not from sadness, not even from relief, but from the deep, full feeling of something closing, not ending, but healing. The loop had completed. The wound had aired and stitched itself with time, courage, and truth. And in that moment, I realized sometimes the gift isn't a single moment. It's a series of small choices: letting go, forgiving, waiting, trusting, all leading to the return of someone you thought you'd lost. And when they do come back, you don't scold them for the years they were gone. You open the door, hold out your arms, and say, "Welcome home." The letter stayed on my nightstand for days. Every morning, I'd reread it slowly, word by word, as if making sure it hadn't changed overnight. As if I still believed that things this good couldn't last. That maybe Natalie would wake up and change her mind again. Retreat behind those old walls, rewrite me back into the villain of her narrative. But she didn't. Each day she stayed. Not physically, no. She had her own life, her own rhythm now, but emotionally she stayed. She texted. She called. She sent me photos of the bookstore she had passed and thought I might like. Little things. Unprompted. There was no more performance in our connection, only presence. One morning, I received a message. "Camilla said something today that hit me." She said, "Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's giving up the hope of a better past." I think I'm finally ready to give that up. Thought you'd want to know. I read that message over and over. Then I stood from my kitchen table, went out to the garage, and pulled out an old dusty box I hadn't opened in nearly 15 years. Inside were photos, hundreds of them. Me and Steven, baby Natalie, birthday parties, hospital visits, a picture of me in my uniform from the flower shop where I worked after he left. One of Natalie asleep on my lap while I sat up against the headboard, clearly exhausted. Evidence of a life lived in fragments, none of them perfect, but all of them real. That afternoon, I began organizing them into albums. I labeled each one not just by date, but by emotion. The year I survived in silence. When Natalie didn't know I was crying in the bathroom. The days she hugged me without hesitation. I wasn't doing it to preserve a legacy. I was doing it to witness my own life again, this time, without the guilt, without the judgment. Just as a woman who had loved as hard as she could, even when it wasn't returned. A few weeks later, Natalie stopped by with a wide-brimmed hat and a pair of gardening gloves. "What are we doing today?" she asked brightly. I was going to prune the roses. "Well, not without me," she said, already pulling on the gloves. We worked in the garden, shoulder to shoulder, the silence between us, no longer awkward, just comfortable. After a while, she said, "I've been thinking about that day. The gift." I nodded, not looking at her. "I don't know what made me take it," she said. "It wasn't even intentional. It was like, I couldn't help myself." "Exactly," I said. "That's why it worked." She laughed. "You planned that, didn't you?" "I did." She leaned on the handle of her trowel and stared at me. "Was it hard, letting me take something meant for you?" I wiped my forehead. "Not really, because I knew what was inside, and I knew it would only work if you took it believing it was yours." "That's twisted," she said, half laughing. "It's parenting," I replied. "Sometimes love looks like manipulation, but only when the goal is healing." She smiled. We sat on the edge of the garden bed, sweat on our brows, soil on our clothes. She pulled off her gloves and stared at her hands. "Do you ever wish you had a different daughter?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I looked at her. "No. Really, really. I used to wish I could make you understand me, but I never wished you were someone else." Her eyes shone. "I always thought you were disappointed in me. I was never disappointed in you. I was disappointed in the distance between us, in how hard it was to reach you." She nodded. I felt the same. I touched her arm. "But we're here now." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I still have so much more to ask you," she said. "And I have so much more to tell. Promise me something, anything. Don't wait for a special moment to share the rest. Just tell me, bit by bit." even the ugly parts. I took her hand. I promise. That evening, we went inside and sat with the photo albums I had pulled together. She flipped through them slowly, eyes wide. "Where was this taken?" she asked, pointing to a blurry image of me sitting in a folding chair at her 5th birthday party, face stiff with exhaustion. "That was the year I worked 3 jobs," I said. "That cake cost more than my grocery budget for the week." She stared at the photo. "You look so tired." I was. "Why didn't you tell me you were 5?" She turned the page. More images. Me in the garden. Natalie playing with her dolls. A photo of her hugging a teddy bear with duct tape on the arm. "I remember this bear," she said. "I cried when you said we couldn't afford a new one. I stayed up past midnight sewing it." She looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't know. I never wanted you to." She reached across the table and took my hand again, something that had become more natural now. "I wish I could go back and hug you then." "I think you're doing that now," I said. We spent the rest of the evening like that, turning pages, rediscovering each other. Before she left, Natalie walked to the front door, paused, then turned back. "There's something I need to tell you." I waited. "I've been invited to speak at a local event, a panel about healing generational wounds. They want me to talk about, well, us. About how the truth sometimes needs time. About how daughters and mothers can both be right and wrong at the same time." I felt pride rise in my chest. "That's beautiful," I said. "I want you there." I nodded. "Of course." She smiled. "You won't have to say anything. Just be in the front row. Like always. Like always." Even when she hated me. Even when she walked away. Even when she thought I was the enemy. I was always there. And now, for the first time, she was asking me to be seen as her mother, not resented, not endured, but acknowledged. Later, after she drove away, I sat in my armchair with a mug of tea and the music box in my lap, the one she thought was her only memory of love. I wound it slowly, let the familiar tune float into the silence of the room, and for the first time, it didn't make me ache. It made me grateful. Because love, when it returns, doesn't knock loudly. It comes in small gestures. Shared tea. A photo rediscovered. A truth finally heard. A daughter reaching not to take, but to hold. And that is the real gift. The auditorium wasn't large, maybe 70 seats at most, but every one of them was filled. The evening sun streamed in through high windows, casting soft light on the modest stage where Natalie stood, palms folded, heart visibly pounding. I sat in the front row just like she'd asked. My hands rested on my lap, but my heart, it was everywhere. In my throat, in the tips of my fingers, in the stillness of that room, as everyone waited for her to speak. She glanced at me before beginning, and for a split second I saw her as I had when she was 6, clinging to my hand before her first piano recital, cheeks flushed with fear, eyes darting toward the exit. But this time she didn't run. She stepped forward, took a breath, and began. "I used to think truth was something you took," she said, her voice steady. "That if you didn't grab it first, someone else would. That if you didn't own the narrative, someone else would write you out." Silence. She looked around the room. I lived most of my life feeling owed something, explanations, apologies, space, especially from my mother. The audience remained still curious. I thought she kept things from me to control me, that her silence was rejection, that her strength was emotional distance. But I was wrong. She paused. "My mother gave me a gift once, something that wasn't meant for me. I took it because I always do. And inside that box was a letter. A truth I wasn't ready for. A truth I didn't ask for. But it cracked something open." She looked right at me then. And when I finally stopped shouting and started listening, I realized something devastating and beautiful. Another breath. That my mother had never stopped loving me, even when I made her my villain. I felt my breath catch, but I didn't cry. Not yet. She continued. She let me walk away. She let me believe my version. But she also left the door unlocked always. Quietly. Without fanfare. And when I came back, she didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "Welcome home." The room seemed to blur around me. I could hear people breathing, shifting, sniffling. But all I could see was her. My daughter standing tall, not as a child, not as a wounded adult, but as a woman who had walked through the fire and finally reached back. "I think we underestimate what it takes for a parent to let go," she said, voice softer now. "To stop trying to fix or explain, to stand in their truth and wait. Just wait until the child is ready." She looked down for a second, then back up. My mother waited. And because of that, I found her again. The applause came slowly, then rose, not wild but reverent, like the sound of something healing. Natalie stepped down from the stage and walked straight to me. She didn't speak. She just pulled me to my feet and hugged me tight. "I was so afraid you wouldn't come," she whispered in my ear. "I would have come even if you hadn't asked," I said. "But thank you for asking." We walked out into the parking lot together under the cool evening sky. "I can't believe I did that," she said, laughing nervously. "You did more than that," I said. "You told the truth. That's not easy." She looked up at the sky. "I think I've spent so much time being afraid of my own feelings that I forgot they could be useful." We drove back to my house in silence, the good kind, and sat in the living room, shoes off, cups of tea between us. "Do you remember the first time you left?" I asked suddenly. She blinked. "Which time?" "The first time you packed your things and said you couldn't handle my rules anymore." She looked down. "I was 19. You said I was suffocating you." She closed her eyes. "I thought being challenged meant I wasn't loved." I nodded. "And I thought setting boundaries meant I was failing as a mother." She turned to me. "I didn't realize until this year how much I've been avoiding myself, not just you. I blamed you because it was easier than facing the truth of who I was becoming." "Who were you becoming?" She thought about it. "Someone angry, entitled, restless, addicted to being right. And who are you now?" She smiled faintly. "Someone who's learning." I reached across the couch and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. She let me. "I want to give you something," she said, reaching into her bag. She handed me a new journal. "I've been keeping one like you do," she said. "But this one's for us. I thought we could write in it together. When we remember things. When we want to understand something better. No rules. Just pages." I opened the first page. It was blank except for a quote she had written at the top. "Sometimes healing begins when we stop trying to change the past and start trying to witness it." I looked at her, and my voice caught in my throat. "You're not the same woman you were a year ago." She smiled. "Neither are you." And she was right. Grief had aged me. Silence had hardened me. But now, something softer was returning. Something maternal, yes, but also womanly whole. A part of me that had nothing to do with sacrifice and everything to do with presence. She stayed the night. No big discussion, no plan. She just asked, "Can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course," I said. And like that, she was home. In the morning, I found her sitting in the kitchen with the journal open, scribbling something. She looked up and said, "I want to make a new family tradition. Oh, letters. Every birthday we write each other a letter. Not a card. A letter. About what we've learned. How we've grown. What we see in each other." I smiled. "That sounds perfect. I want to know you while I still can," she said. "Not as a mother, but as a woman." And that was everything. For so long I had waited for her to see me not as the keeper of rules, the fixer of meals, the holder of wounds, but as Margaret. Now I was no longer invisible. I was seen. I was heard. I was known. And all because she took a gift that wasn't hers, and in doing so, finally understood that love isn't something you demand. It's something you earn moment by moment, truth by truth, until one day it simply stands before you and says, I'm here, and I'm not leaving again. The morning after Natalie stayed over, I made pancakes. It wasn't a big thing, just a quiet ritual we hadn't shared in decades. I used to make them every Sunday when she was little, adding blueberries and a dusting of powdered sugar if we had any. She wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, barefoot hair still sleep mussed, and smiled like it was 1992 again. You're making the ones with cinnamon, she asked, sniffing the air. I remembered, I said. She sat at the table and watched me flip the golden rounds onto a plate. I used to think these were magic. Maybe they were, I said. We all need magic when we're little. She took the plate when I handed it to her and ate slowly, eyes on me as if cataloging something my hands, the way I moved, the way I set the table. After a few minutes, she said, You used to hum when you cooked. I paused, surprised. I didn't think you noticed. I always noticed. I just didn't know how to say I liked it. I smiled and reached for my tea. You were a watchful child, even when you were pretending not to care. I didn't know how to ask for love, she said. So I tested it instead. I looked at her. You don't have to test it anymore. I know. We sat in that warmth, the sound of the kettle whistling, the smell of cinnamon and maple in the air. She glanced at the clock. I have to leave in a bit. Work call. I nodded. Before you go, I want to give you something. I rose from the table and went to my bedroom. From the drawer in my nightstand, I pulled out the small wooden box I'd kept for years, the one that held letters I had written but never sent. When I came back, I placed it in front of her. These are all the things I wanted to say when I didn't know how I said. Some are letters to you, some to your father, some just to myself. Her fingers hovered above the lid. Are you sure? I nodded. If you're ready, they're yours. She opened the box slowly and picked up the first letter. It was dated 2004, the year she left for college, the year we had our worst fight, the year I stood at the top of the stairs after she slammed the door and said to no one, I think I just lost her for good. She read the letter silently, eyes scanning my shaky cursive. Then she looked at me and whispered, I never knew you wrote all this. I didn't know how else to keep loving you when you weren't listening. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She placed the letter back and said, I want to take my time with these. Of course. She held the box like something sacred. Not heavy, just meaningful. Before she left, she hugged me at the door longer than usual. Then, as she pulled away, she said something she hadn't said since she was a teenager. You're my favorite person. I laughed. Now I know you're just trying to butter me up. She shook her head. I mean it. And I don't say it enough. I watched her get in her car, watched her drive off, and I felt something deep and full settle in my chest. Not relief. Resolution. That night, I sat with my own journal and wrote, She's not the same girl who used to scream at me for saying no. She's not the same woman who walked away and didn't call for weeks. She's becoming. And I get to witness it. That's the gift. The next few weeks moved like slow river water. Visits, conversations, shared meals. She even took me out once to a small bookstore cafe I hadn't been to in years. I thought we could scout the place, she said, in case you ever still wanted to open your shop. You remembered that dream? I asked. She smiled. I've started writing them down. Yours and mine. She pulled out a little leather notebook from her purse. Inside, scribbled in her hand, were lists. Mom's dream bookstore, big windows. Tea station, shelves by theme, not genre. Storytelling nights, a corner for quiet writing. You were serious, I said, stunned. She nodded. It might not happen next month. Or next year. but I want us to build it. Together. I sat back in the wooden chair watching her. You're really trying to give back, I said. She looked down. I spent so many years taking. I think I forgot how good it feels to give. You're doing beautifully. She reached across the table, took my hand. Because I had the best teacher. There was no bitterness left in her voice. No lingering sharpness in her gaze. Just love. Earned love. The kind that doesn't need proving. The kind that holds steady even when silence returns. We walked out of that cafe with the beginnings of a blueprint sketched in her notebook notes. Color ideas, budget lines. And I realized as we stepped out into the warm afternoon light that our story had already become more than just a private victory. It had become a legacy, not of perfection, but of patience, not of control, but of trust. And all of it, every painful, beautiful, humbling step had begun with a box, a gift that was never meant to be taken, and yet had to be, so that truth could finally arrive. It was a quiet Thursday when I sat alone in the living room, the last light of evening stretching across the rug in golden lines. Natalie had just left a short visit, dropping off a tea blend she'd picked up from a new shop downtown. No fanfare, no long conversations, just a simple hug and a smile that said, "I'm here. I love you. See you soon." And somehow that simplicity felt louder than any apology ever could. I turned on the lamp, made a cup of the tea she'd brought, and sat by the window where the gift box once sat so many weeks ago, the one she had taken without asking. The one that had started all of this. Funny how something so small could contain an entire shift in a relationship. A letter, a moment, a decision to step back and let someone else step forward. That box, what she took, was never about the object itself. It was about her instinct to claim and my quiet decision to let her. Not out of surrender, but out of strategy, out of love. Because love, I've learned, sometimes means not protecting someone from themselves. Sometimes it means letting them take the wrong thing so they can find the right truth. Natalie's truth didn't live in that letter. It lived in everything that came after. In the tears she shed alone in her car. In the courage it took to come back and knock on my door. In the journal we now share. In the tea she left on my counter without needing recognition. In the gentle way she now says, "I see you, Mom," and means it. That's the thing about broken relationships. They don't mend like skin. They don't scar and vanish. They regrow slowly like old trees sprouting new limbs, while the knots and twists of history remain in their rings. You don't forget what was lost, but you start to build again, together. And that more than any spoken apology is the truest kind of healing. Natalie and I have a rhythm now. We don't tiptoe. We don't explode. We ask. We wait. We answer with thought, not defense. I've stopped measuring our connection by how often she visits or what she gives me. I measure it in how she looks at me, in how she listens, in how she speaks of me to others, no longer as the reason for her pain, but as the anchor that held through the storm. And she too is different. She no longer grabs what isn't hers. She no longer interrupts to be heard. She gives space. She receives without suspicion. She reflects. One evening not long ago, we sat on the porch watching the sunset, and she said, "You know, for a long time I thought I had to earn your love." "You never did," I replied. She nodded. "I know that now. But I think part of me resented you because I believed love should be loud, obvious, dramatic. And yours wasn't." "No," I smiled. "Mine was in the quiet." "I missed it," she whispered. "You've found it now." She looked at me, eyes soft. "And I'm never letting it go again." That night she stayed. We didn't talk much. We sat in front of an old movie and shared a bowl of popcorn just like we used to when she was a teenager, before the arguments, before the slammed doors and the long silences. And in that simple, ordinary moment, I realized something I hadn't dared believe. We had made it. Not to perfection, not to fairy tale closeness, but to something better: mutual respect, peace, clarity. Natalie didn't need to be the daughter I imagined, and I no longer needed to be the mother she wanted me to be. We were ourselves, finally, and that was more than enough. A week later, she brought over a mock-up of our dream, the bookstore. It had a name now: Second Bloom. She grinned as she handed me the design. Because that's what we are, right? A second bloom. Not the first, but stronger because of what we've endured. I touched the paper and nodded. It's perfect. We're not rushing into it. We're letting it grow like everything else. One page at a time, one shelf at a time, one visit, one meal, one truth at a time. And so, to anyone listening to my story, to anyone holding on to the ache of a relationship that feels too broken to fix, let me tell you this. You don't always need to shout to be heard. You don't always need to demand to receive. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait, with love, with grace, with an open door and a box in plain sight. Because when the person you love is ready, they might just take the thing you left for them, and inside, they'll find not just the truth, but the first step back to you. So if this story touched you, if you saw yourself in it, or your daughter, or your mother, don't just let it pass you by. Share your story in the comments, or better yet, send it to the one you've been waiting to hear from. Because someone out there might be ready to pick up the gift you've quietly left for them. And when they do, be ready to say, "Welcome home." Thank you for listening to this story on Grace's Truth. If it resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And tell us in the comments, have you ever given someone a second chance or received one that changed everything? Until next time, may your truth be heard and your heart be whole.